So that's good. All right. So on behalf of Tamil Nadu Science Forum and Popular Science Lecture Group, I extend my warm welcome to you all. Today we are going to have a webinar on evolution of parental care in frogs and toads. This lecture shall be delivered by Professor K.S. Seshadri. This meeting shall be in English. We would like to have a brief introduction about the Tamil Nadu Science Forum and the speaker and PSL, which shall be done soon. Dr. Poonam Sethi our EC member and the faculty member of Guru Nanak College shall introduce the speaker. After that, Dr. Seshadri shall talk about 40 to 45 minutes and we'll have a question answer session. That's about 30 to 45 minutes. We will wind up everything by 6 p.m. So that's our plan today. The PSL is part of the Tamil Nadu Science Forum that started functioning in 2018. After that, although the TNSF is functioning from 1980 onwards, the PSL came into existence when we decided to strengthen the activities of the TNSF in the higher science area. So we have conducted 50 lectures so far, and this is our 51st lecture. The first lecture was held in July 2018 as Stephen Hawkes Memorial Lecture. The PSL used to have its lecture in the hall, and we have adapted to virtual meeting during the pandemic period. We had to return back to the hall soon. I hope that it's going to be a hybrid meeting in future because the pandemic has trained us to have a remote meeting as well as a hybrid meeting. I would request all the audience to mute your mic, and so that the event can go on without any hindrance. When the question answer session starts, you can unmute your mic and you can directly ask the question to the speaker, or if you can write your questions in the chat box. So we would also like to have a feedback on this webinar from you, and we are going to post a Google form. The link will be provided in the chat window. Fill up the form and provide your contact details and your opinion of this program. This will guide us to conduct the program future and in a much better way, and we can also communicate using the contact details. And we also have, the PSL is also have Telegram group. And we are going to provide the link for the Telegram group. I will strongly encourage you to join the Telegram group. And we also have the Google groups, email group. So the link for that will also be provided, and we encourage you to join the Google group as well. So we are broadcasting this lecture in YouTube, and if any of you dropped from this meeting due to any reason unable to get into the meeting, you can go to the YouTube and watch the program broadcast. With regard to the Tamil Nadu Science Forum, it was started in 1980 by few faculty members, scientists in Chennai, and it was initially conducting some hall meetings. During 1986, it started expanding into activities throughout Tamil Nadu, and it formed a artist troupe. They start propagating science through art. They travel from south to Chennai, the Kanyakumari to Chennai, and that was an announcement that the Tamil Nadu Science Forum, existence of Tamil Nadu Science Forum as a body, and thereafter we get into the literacy program. So we get into the literacy program for Virudhunagar district and later on Pudukkottai district, and it started working on the total literacy campaign throughout Tamil Nadu. And we are so we become a state level body, and we have a good amount of office bearers and functionaries in the state, and we have district bodies and all. We also have more than 30,000 members throughout Tamil Nadu. And it has been divided the organization activities has been divided into 6 different verticals now to take care of different kind of activities. The first activity is science propagation, which we are doing. PSL is part of science propagation program. And the second activities is publishing science publications. Now we bring some magazines. Tamil, in Tamil it is Thulir, and English Jantar Mantar. We also have a couple of other magazines. And we have Youth for Science. You have another vertical called the taking the science to the women. That's called the Samam. We also have the publishing science books as well. So these are all the verticals in which we are functioning, and I encourage all the participants to become member of Tamil Nadu Science Forum. So we will be posting the link for becoming a member of Tamil Nadu Science Forum. The annual subscription is 30 rupees only. You will get a newsletter from us, what's going on in Science Forum. That will be dispatched every month. So with this, I invite Dr. Poonam Sethi to introduce the speaker, Dr. Sheshadri.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to all. I'm really privileged to welcome Dr. K.S. Sheshadri, sir. K.S. Sheshadri, sir, is from the Department of Sciences and is an Inspire Faculty Fellow in the Macrophysiology Lab, Center for Ecological Sciences, Indian Institute of Science. He is a terrestrial ecologist studying the aspects of ecology, evolutionary biology across diverse landscapes. He has also researched on ecological systems ranging from dragonflies to epiphytes in the tall forest canopies in the Western Ghats. As a part of his doctoral research at the National University of Singapore, he had discovered new species, new reproductive behavior of frogs, and he has also examined the evolutionary ecology of such behavior of frogs. He served as the research director at the iconic Agumbe Rainforest Research Station, trying to understand how India's longest venomous snake navigated through the complex landscapes. Isn't it interesting? And he is also committed to the cause of conservation and strongly believes that there is an urgent need to rekindle a sense of wonder towards nature among people and get them to care about our planet. He also enjoys writing about science and ecology to the people outside of the academia. In his spare time, one could find him tending in his terrace garden, reading a book or exploring the wilderness with a pair of binoculars and sometimes a camera. So welcome you, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the nice introduction. I'm really glad to be here, and I should thank Shubha for getting me to give this talk. I will quickly share my screen and get started. So it's 6:15 now, so I have about 45 minutes to talk about my work, I guess. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I will continue. If there's any slides don't work, just let me know, because I can't see any of you. I can only see my screen. Cool. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to this talk on a Sunday evening. I will talk about some of the work I did as a PhD student and some of the work I did as a postdoctoral fellow in Center for Ecological Science. You'll see here straight away that I've changed my title slightly. Anurans are basically a group of amphibians that don't have a tail. So frogs and toads are called anurans. And I'll talk about something called parental care, which we are very familiar with, being humans. And I'll talk about how frogs also are able to engage in behavior that is sometimes as complex as how we take care of our children. This is largely what I'm going to present today as a part of my PhD work. And incidentally, it so happens that I did all this work in a place in Tamil Nadu. Cool. So when we think of frogs, what we see is an incredible diversity of shapes, colors, and sizes and behavior. The Western Ghats is one of the places on the planet which has the highest number of frogs. When I say frogs, I also mean toads. toads are a group of frogs. So I can use these terms interchangeably. Don't get confused. There is, I think the recent number is around 450 species of frogs in the Western Ghats, and over 80% of them are found nowhere else on Earth. They're only found in a particular part of the Western Ghats. Apart from this diversity in shape, size, and form, we also see an incredible diversity in the reproductive behavior. And by reproductive behavior, I mean the steps in which they make more frogs. Their breeding behavior is also incredibly diverse. So for example, you can see here on the left corner that there's a group of frogs clinging around leaves. And in the next panel, you see a frog standing on two legs and doing something on a twig. And then you see a frog inside what is bamboo. And here you'll see a frog that's like dancing to another individual. So this incredible diversity is very hard to also understand. So what people have done is made observations of these behavior in specific contexts. So people have looked at how a female frog chooses multiple males who are competing. Or people have looked at how frogs vocalize, right? That's how we all know frogs as. In the monsoon, they'll start croaking, and that's the most familiar thing we recognize about frogs. And you see them interacting acoustically by sound, and there's a lot of energy that gets spent in vocalization, and that energetics has also been studied. People have also looked at how they're distributed in time and space. So if you live outside the city or close to a forest patch, if you've gone out for a walk at night, you'll see a lot of frogs in different places. And in some places, there won't be any frogs. So there is some kind of a spatial and social organization that's going on. And then, of course, there is parental care, which people have really studied across the world, less so in India. And all of this has essentially started from natural history observations, basically where people would be going out to the forest or going out to a paddy field and looking at what's around, and they suddenly see some behavior, and that lets them to ask a lot of these questions. Because there is an incredible diversity in how frogs reproduce, we need a system of classification. And one of the ways in which we classify this behavior is by calling or is by assigning them into reproductive modes. What is a reproductive mode? It's basically made of three components. The first one is where the eggs are laid. So a lot of frogs lay eggs in water, but there are also frogs that lay eggs on the ground. They lay eggs away from water. And collectively, these are called oviposition site. And for example, it could be under a leaf or under a rock when it's on the ground. And if it's aquatic, then it's in the water. It's floating on the water, or it is sometimes kept in crevices in water, rocks and crevices in water. The second part of it is what kind of an egg they're laying. And again, here we would have all learned that amphibians are animals that live on land and water, and there's always a tadpole stage. Turns out it's not really true. Amphibians are animals that have a dual life phase. That's the original meaning of amphibios. Amphi meaning dual and bios meaning life forms. And a large number of frogs undergo what is called direct development, where they lay an egg. As you can see in this picture on your right, you can see, you can see that the eggs are away from water, and once these eggs develop, a tiny frog hatches out of it. And this has been seen in about 50% of all frogs on the planet. There are 9,000 species, about half of them undergo direct development. And every time there's been direct development that's been observed, it is to do with increasing terrestriality. So frogs evolved from fish-like ancestors a couple of million years ago, and not a couple of million years ago, hundreds of million years ago, 350, 360 million years ago. They moved on to land from an aquatic ancestor. And since then, they have been moving away from water whenever they get a chance. So where they lay the eggs, what kind of an egg they lay, and whether or not there is a parent caring for the eggs. These are the three criteria using which amphibian reproductive behavior has been classified into 44 different reproductive modes, or maybe it's 45 this year. And again, this set of behaviors are continuously increasing because people are going out and making more observations and finding new things out. What is parental care? We all should be knowing. Parents take care of us, we take care of our children, and it's an incredibly diverse form of behavior which is across taxa. You'll see it in tiny little insects to you'll see it in large mammals like an elephant. And every time there is evolution of parental care, it's in complex ways. It can range from simply being with the offspring to feeding them or to caring for them for long durations. Humans perhaps have the longest amount of parental care. Typically, it's defined as any investment, post-zygotic investment by either parent that enhances the survivorship of the offspring. That's when we would call a behavior parental care. But this is again, like I said before, it's incredibly diverse, and broadly we have 11 forms of parental care across the vertebrate group. These could be simply provisioning gametes to protecting or feeding mature offsprings. And every time a parent cares for the offspring, it comes at a cost to the parent. It's not really easy taking care of offspring, and parental care is almost always, wherever people have studied it, it's very costly to the adult. It could be the adult male or the adult female. Turns out it's costly. And along with the evolution of parental care, there are also a set of strategies which are evolved, which are essentially to deter predation. If you think about parental care, the parent is sitting with, like a bird, for example, is sitting with eggs. The eggs cannot move. And the adult bird needs to come up with strategies to avoid predation. And these could be in the form of cryptic coloration or could be hiding in a place that's inaccessible to predators and so on. So there's a lot of complexity that evolves when parental care is associated with an organism. It's a trait that is associated with an organism. Specifically in frogs, we know about 8 different modes of parental care. Some of the examples are the classic Suriname toad from the island of Suriname, where the eggs are embedded in specific pockets on the back. And there are frogs, this is a hemipractis frog from South America, where the eggs are carried on the back. So the eggs are attached to the back and the male goes around carrying these eggs. And this is the famous poison dart frog, where the tadpoles hatch and they cling on to the back of the adult and get dispersed by the adult. And there's also tadpole brooding, where there's a tadpole inside the vocal sac of this male, and they emerge as froglets and jump out of the parent's mouth. So there's an incredible diversity, and we're still trying to understand why or how these kinds of behavior have evolved. And looking at why they've evolved, there are some examples, or there are some directions which we are looking at. We have 8 forms of parental care, and this is in frogs. And every time someone has looked at frogs with parental care, they have found that they lay a small number of eggs. There are some frogs that lay close to 800 eggs in one setting, but there are also other species that lay only about 5 to 6 eggs. And these eggs are really large in size, and they're correlated with the breeding pool size. So if you think about a frog that's laying eggs in a little pond, there are a lot of other predators also. But if it lays eggs in a small tree hole, the number of predators in that tree hole are fewer than what is in the lake. So this increasing moving away from water and moving away from predators it seems like it is associated with the evolution of parental care. And more species that are terrestrially living have parental care, have been associated with parental care also. And this is probably to do with harsh environmental conditions. Although frogs evolved from fish-like organisms, they moved onto land and they cannot survive without moisture. And on land, the atmospheric moisture is fluctuating all the time. So maybe that's why parental care associated with terrestrial breeding. And people have also found correlations between how long the eggs take to develop and how long the care duration is with terrestriality. Again, it's linked to the fluctuation in the atmospheric temperature and humidity. And turns out uniparental care, where only one of the parent cares for the offspring, is more ancestral. So frogs evolved from fish-like animals, and multiple forms of parental care evolved from one of the parent caring for the offspring. This is broadly what we know, and this I'm setting the stage for explaining the things that I did. Moving into the Western Ghats, we all know it's this beautiful 3,000-kilometer landscape along the western coast of India. There's an incredible diversity of flora, fauna, cultures, and everything. And frogs, of course, are an important part of this landscape, with 80% of all the frogs found here being found nowhere else on Earth. And over the recent years, you would have noticed that a lot of new discoveries of species are being made from the Western Ghats. More and more people are finding frogs in the Western Ghats. And while this is all good, there's also more attention that needs to be given to what these frogs are doing. What is the behavior of these frogs? And every time someone has looked at the behavior of frogs, almost every time there's a new discovery that's being reported. This is one such instance. This is from way back in 2011 when I was working in the Kalakkad Mudanthirai Tiger Reserve. I was working on plants, but during the night I would go looking for frogs. And in one of the night walks, my colleagues and I came across this. I'll play the video and we'll see what happens.
Oh, that bit of opening is enough for it to kind of slither through, is it? You can make a documentary out of it. Yeah.
That's where you should be looking at.
Wow. Oh. Wow. Cliffhanger. Part 2.
Oops. So turns out there was a frog that was entering bamboo. This is the kind of reed bamboo that we make flutes out of. It's not the large Dendrocalamus bamboo. So curious to know what was going on inside, I went back the next morning and carefully cut the bamboo open, and I saw that there was a frog sitting with the eggs inside. These tiny white circular things you see are the eggs. And for the next couple of weeks, I kept going back to the same place, opening the bamboo, checking what was going on. And turns out the eggs were developing into tiny little frogs. You can see the embryo developing here. Frog eggs are transparent, unlike chicken eggs, which have a hard shell. Frog eggs don't have such hard shell, and there you can see the development happening inside. And pretty soon there were baby frogs that would hatch from these eggs. This immediately suggested to me that these eggs were direct developing, which means they don't really have a free living tadpole stage. Everything that happens inside the egg, and the bamboo does not have any water either. What was going on here? And when I started digging deeper into the frog, turns out the frog was called Rauergistus chalazodus. It's called the Chalazodus bubbliness frog. It was described in the 1800s, and it was lost to science. Nobody knew where this frog was until in 2011, when we rediscovered this frog from the forest of Kalakkad. And when I compared my observations with other frogs from the region, I found out that another species, which looks, at least the eye pattern looks similar to the frog that we have, also had the same behavior where they would breed inside the bamboo. And for about a month or two, I kept locating calling frogs and cutting bamboo open to see what was inside. So I counted the number of eggs, I took photographs, and I measured the diameter of the eggs and estimated how long they take to hatch from when I first observed them to when they all hatched. Turns out they lay about six eggs in a clutch on average, and the eggs are really large, relatively large. And the frog itself is about 26 millimeters, which is the size of my thumb. And they're laying eggs that are 5 millimeters in diameter, which is the size of my thumbnail, which again tells me that there is a parental care behavior associated with the species. And every time when I cut the bamboo open, I could see the male sitting with the eggs. So we ended up, what happened was I compared the reproductive mode that we have with all the known reproductive modes from all over the world. And it didn't match with any of the descriptions that we know about. And therefore, we described it as a novel reproductive behavior for all frogs. And we defined it as direct developing eggs laid inside a bamboo, devoid of any water, with the male providing parental care. This work was published in a journal called the Biological Journal of the Linnean Society. And because this was a new discovery of a behavior, a lot of media organizations picked it up, and a lot of attention was given to the fact that a frog breeds inside a bamboo. This itself was not really well known before this. To give you a brief layout of where this work happened, so all the work that I'm going to talk about now onwards is from one location in the Western Ghats. The frog is called Chalazodus. It's a beautiful tiny frog, half the size of my thumb. And they're found along streams. So this is a stream along, sorry, these are habitats along a stream where the bamboo grows. This is called the Oaklandra reed bamboo, ethel as we call it in the local landscape. And this grows along the steep banks of the streams. And these frogs are only found in these habitats. Occasionally, they are found in forests nearby. I worked in the southern tip of Western Ghats, close to Tirunelveli, in a place called Kalakad Mudathare Tiger Reserve. And the green dot you see here is where I did most of the work. It's a high elevation forest, about 1,300 meters in elevation. It rains for about 6 months in a year, and in other times of the day, it's rather dry. One of the problems I had with making any further behavioral observations with this frog is that I had to cut the bamboo open. And cutting bamboo open is not really useful because the nest or the egg is, or the habitat is destroyed. So what I wanted to do was figure out a way in which I could observe what was going on inside the bamboo without disturbing it. And by then I had joined my PhD program in Singapore, and I went looking for a hardware shop that would sell cameras that they use to inspect drain pipes. So I went and picked up a drain inspection camera, and I could do this now, where I could insert the camera through the bamboo. I would make a small hole and insert the camera. And you can see here the male frog is sitting on eggs. It's not really disturbed by the camera or the light. And now I have this new tool where I could go listen to frog calls, and instead of cutting the bamboo open, I could examine what was going on inside using the camera. This is how we would do it. This is my colleague Vignesh and I, and the orange device is called an endoscope, which was also connected to a camera, connected to a laptop, and we could take pictures. We did this in the forest at night. We go out at night, and night is when frogs are active. And I know the frog inside is a male because the males are the ones that typically among frogs, it is the male that vocalizes. The female is usually silent. So I started documenting what the males are doing inside. And I looked at 17 oviposition sites and made some 600 observations where every time I observed, there was only the male that was inside. Initial position of the male. So as soon as I inserted the camera, what was the male doing? I considered that as caregiving behavior. So the male could be sitting adjacent to the eggs. They could be sitting on the eggs. They could be sitting ahead of the eggs or at the entrance. Sometimes the eggs would hatch and the male would be sitting with the tadpoles or the froglets. Sometimes they would also hide behind the eggs or crawl over the camera and escape. So these the latter two I did not consider as parental care behavior. Of the 643 observations, 88% of the time, the male was present with the eggs, which again tells me that the male is actively engaging in some behavior that's benefiting the eggs. Otherwise, the male could go out and go do anything that he wants. And I counted the number of days for these eggs to hatch. Turns out they take a long time, about a month, for the eggs to hatch into tiny froglets. There were times when there were more than one set of egg clutches, and there were 2 instances where there were 3 sets of eggs in the same bamboo cavity. Now, this is a graph that shows what the behaviors are. Turns out the most common behavior is egg attendance, where the frogs are sitting either adjacent to the eggs or on the eggs, or they're guarding the eggs by being ahead of eggs or at the entrance or next to the froglets. The times when they would escape and move away, I did not consider as parental care behavior. Cool. So now I know the frogs are laying eggs inside bamboo. I know the males are actively engaging in some form of protection or care for the eggs. But the ultimate proof, if I can call it proof, is the benefit of parental care as such has to be that the offspring has to survive better compared to clutches without offspring. So one simple experiment to find out if the parental care is actually benefiting the offspring is to look at 2 egg clutches where one of them has caregiving parent, the other doesn't. This is naturally not possible to do in the wild, and therefore I had to undertake an experiment where I would manipulate the setup. What I did was to find different number of oviposition sites. So I would go searching for the frogs at night, and I selected one randomly as a control where I didn't do anything. And in the other, I would remove the male artificially. That would be my treatment. So all else being equal, so same number of eggs, similar size of the bamboo, similar distance from the stream. So I would calculate all that and then randomly remove one from one of the things. I would remove the male. When I say quantify the oviposition site, I would measure the diameter of the bamboo, the length of the bamboo internode, and how far away from stream and all that. I removed the male from one, and I did nothing in the other. And for the next month and a half, I know it takes 37 days to hatch, right? So every night, I'd go. Every night, I'd go and look at what was going on in the bamboo. So I would insert my endoscope and I would take pictures. Along with pictures, I would also. There's some disturbance.
I think there's some noise. Vijayan sir, can you check that?
Muted, ma'am.
Okay.
Oh, good. Thank you. So I would observe this bamboo cavities and look at how the eggs are developing. So because the eggs are transparent, I can take pictures of these eggs and I can measure the size from photographs because I know the size. This is a schematic of what the oviposition site looks like. So if you imagine this to be the bamboo internode, the frog is usually calling from inside or outside, and there's a small opening at the base of the bamboo where the frogs enter the bamboo cavity. Once they enter, they lay eggs on top of the internode. So I measured the opening length, opening width, length of the internode, and then took pictures of the eggs, counted the number of eggs, measured the size of eggs, and noted down how long it takes for them to hatch. And I would also insert a temperature and a humidity probe. It's a small device that I would insert and then measure the temperature and humidity inside the bamboo. And I did this once every 24 hours. And typically we'd go out at night and do this. With the males that I removed, these males have markings on the side. And using the length of the frog and these markings, I could tell that these males are different individuals from each other. And the male that I removed, I would take it across the stream and leave it in another patch of bamboo and artificially make one cavity in the bamboo and leave the frogs there. The idea was the frog shouldn't come back to its own position site. If it did come back, we would know because of the size and the markings. So I photographed the male and all that. I could look at 26 oviposition sites that had 32 eclatches in them. And one observation for every 24 hours led to close to 1,000 to 1,100 observations. And I did some statistics to compare how the eggs are surviving. So are the eggs surviving in the same numbers between the two, or are they different? Turns out the presence of the male actually is beneficial for the osprey. When I did nothing, so this is the control where I didn't do anything, almost all the eggs survived except for one egg that died. Whereas on the treatment, when I removed the adult male, there was like a 73% increase in mortality. So without the male with the eggs would not survive better, or they would not survive well. The next thing was to see how long the eggs take to die. And we saw mortality in 11 of the 13 eclatches, and the mortality occurred between 1 to 17 nights. The eggs take 30 days to breed, so relatively quickly the eggs would die. And for a long time, I didn't know why the eggs are dying until one night we got lucky, where we were looking at a bamboo cavity that was supposed to be treatment, and the male was not supposed to be inside. But when I inserted the camera and endoscope inside, I could see there was another frog. And we pulled the frog out and saw that the frog had bulged stomach. So the stomach, what was bulged were basically eggs that were missing from the bamboo cavity. That's when we realized that there is conspecific cannibalism. So cannibalism is where one eats their own kind. In this case, the males of the same species are coming in and eating the eggs that are not present with the male. This was surprising, and we never anticipated this. And when we look at the cause of mortality, 83% of the times the mortality was because of some form of predation. Either conspecific males came and ate the eggs. Sometimes flies would come and lay eggs in the frog eggs, and the fly larvae would eat the frog egg, or ants would come and the entire colony of ants would finish the egg clutch. There were other factors also, things like desiccation, where the eggs would dry up. There could be fungus growing on the eggs, or there could be submergence, so water fills in and the eggs will drown. So there was a lot going on with these frogs, and you'll see that there's a lot of unknown cause multiple times. This is because I was only doing one observation every 24 hours, and between the observations, if something happened, I would not know. In either case, this is what I'll just get rid of this screen on top. I don't know how to get rid of it, but that's okay. This work was published as a featured student paper, and again, because it was the first time that we showed the adaptive value of parental care. It's very easy to call it parental care, but to show that parental care is actually enhancing the survivorship of the offspring was an important aspect. And I guess this is novel because it's the male that's guarding its eggs from other males. And we still don't understand why they're doing this. So there's a lot that's not known. You might have also started to wonder what is going on with the holes. How you saw the video initially on how the frogs are entering the bamboo, and we had the same question. We didn't know who's making the holes. Is it the frog that's making the holes, or is it something else? Turns out every time we looked at bamboo cavity that had frogs in them, we saw these little bite marks. So there were like teeth marks on it. And initially I thought, okay, we'll figure this out. We set up camera traps. Camera traps are basically cameras that can take pictures on their own, autonomously take pictures. And we wanted to see if something that's coming and making the hole. We put bait, we put coconut, we put peanut butter. Every time we put out a bait and saw what came there, we saw rats coming and eating everything. None of the rats were nibbling the bamboo. It took us a long time, close to 2 years, to actually eventually find out what was making the hole. It was not the frog. Turns out, my colleague, Dr. Ganesh, who works at A3 in Bangalore, he used to work in this landscape. He's been working in this landscape for 40 years now, and he had seen a squirrel that's going around nibbling bamboo. This is the squirrel. It's called the dusky palm squirrel, or the Nilgiri palm squirrel. It's a really cute squirrel that's about the size of my palm. And they are usually in the dense bamboo clumps, and they're hopping around and nibbling at bamboo. And what we did eventually was spend 2 months in the bamboo during the day. And every time we saw a squirrel, we would follow it to see what its behaviors are. And we saw several of them going around and nibbling the bamboo. So now this work shows that there's a complexity of 3 levels. So there's a squirrel that's going around making holes, presumably to eat the bamboo. There's a frog that finds the bamboo and breeds inside these bamboo cavities, and the plant that is in this landscape growing only along streets. And all 3 of them are endangered and endemic to the Western Ghats. If one of these things goes, we don't really know how the system will change. So there's one level of ecological complexity also associated with parental care in frogs. The bamboo itself is it's not like everything is good with it. There is also a lot of bamboo that's harvested. So this on the top left panel is a picture from Kerala, where this bamboo is grown and harvested for paper and pulp. This is also from Kerala, where reed bamboo is harvested. Young shoots of the reed bamboo are harvested for whatever purpose. They are tied up in bundles and there's nobody to ask. In parts of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, the bamboo is cut and harvested and used as a fence because bamboo is a grass. It grows really fast, and these reeds are effective barricades also. And a lot of times the bamboo shoot is also used for pickling. So if you look at this at all stages of the bamboo, it is being harvested and utilized. But the frog, we know from the quantified habitat thing, I know the frog requires a particular size class of the bamboo. If the bamboo is too thin, the frog cannot enter, or if the bamboo is too big and the squirrel can't nibble and make a hole. So there's a perfect size of the bamboo, which is around 25 to 26 millimeters in diameter. Those are the kinds of bamboo that the frog needs to be able to go inside and lay eggs. Furthermore, the hole has to be at the bottom of the internode and not on top. If the hole is on top, the frogs don't go inside. So to quickly summarize this part of my work, I show that we've discovered a novel reproductive mode where there's a frog that's breeding inside bamboo and laying eggs, and the froglets hatch and they move out and go on to find new bamboo cavities. There's a bamboo squirrel frog system, which is unique. No other system that we know of has these three things interacting. It's the male who cares for the offspring by attending to eggs or guarding. Egg attendance could be to chase away other males, or they could be sitting with the eggs, and a lot of times the males urinate on the eggs to keep them moist, and they also urinate on them to regulate the pH of the eggs. So this essentially might protect the eggs from fungal infections. Again, we don't know why the males are engaging in egg attendance or guarding. What's the adaptive benefit of parental care? Is the male simply hanging around with eggs, or is there a benefit of the male being there? I show that presence of the male leads to an increased offspring survivorship. And it seems like predation, or rather cannibalism, is an important driver for the evolution of parental care in this species of frog. In other species of frogs, there could be other cases why parental care has evolved. But at least for the first time, we show in the Western Ghats that predation is a big factor in why a male has to guard the eggs. And now we don't know why only the male that guards the eggs, why not the female? We have no idea. There are some species where both the male and the female guard the eggs. There are some that only the female does, or there are some that where only the male does. So all of these are questions that we don't really know of, and that brings me to the future directions part of it. How are the females choosing where to lay the eggs? I told you that the hole has to be at the base, which means the male and the female are actively evaluating the habitat. They're quantifying the habitat. They know, okay, at this distance there are eggs, or this distance there are places where I can lay eggs. In this place there is a bamboo that is not useful for me, and so on. So they must be having a great spatial memory, and they might know what's going on there. What are the reproductive costs and the benefits of the male attending eggs? So we don't know if the males are eating anything when they're attending to eggs. Because they're always with the eggs, we don't really know if they're actively going out and foraging. So one way to potentially look at this is see how much body weight they lose from the start of the breeding season to the end of the breeding season. And these frogs breed from like early July to almost till October. So it's a long duration, and we don't really know what the costs and benefits we kind of know, but we don't really know the costs of parental care. And why should they cannibalize eggs of the same species? Is it because they're really hungry and they think unattended eggs are nutritious? I mean, we eat eggs, eggs are nutritious. So is that the only reason, or is there something else that's going on? And one of the things I think might be important is that the squirrel's the one making holes. The cavities are not perfect. So there is a limited number of places where it's like playing musical chair with where you can lay your eggs. And as soon as these males find a cavity where the male is not there and they see eggs, they're like, oh, okay, there's no one here, but there's egg. I'm going to eat it and take over the territory. So it might be a territorial thing, and we don't really know what's going on as well. And in a much broader scale, how are they overcoming the predation risk? The males, are they breeding inside bamboo because there are predators outside, or something else that's going on? While the first three things are something we haven't been able to really look at, the predation risk and parental care is something I investigated during the lockdown. And this is not with Western Ghats frogs. Sorry, this is to do with the global distribution of frogs. And I'll quickly tell you what kind of work I did in this study. So we know predation is a big pressure for a lot of animals. Adult frogs regularly get eaten by snakes, and caregiving adults are often sitting with the eggs, right? The frog that you saw was sitting with the eggs for 37 to 38 days, which means it's risking itself to a predator. And we don't really know how they overcome the risk. So there are multiple examples where caregiving males, along with the eggs, can get injured by a predator, or they can eventually get eaten up. The tiny frogs themselves that emerge could also get eaten. And in some cases, the eggs themselves are vulnerable to predation, and things like snakes can come and eat the eggs. How do they overcome the risk of predation is an important and a fascinating aspect. And we only have to look at Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, the two people who came up with the theory of evolution. Both of them attributed the differences in colors between males and females. So if you look at peacock, the male is flamboyant and colorful, but the female is dull and drab. The reason why some sexes have differently colored males and females, Darwin and Wallace said that it could be to do with predation, evading predation risk or avoiding predation risk. And the logic here is that if something is dull colored and cryptic, then the predator might not see it. Whereas if something is conspicuous, brightly colored, then the predator might be able to see it more often. With that background in mind, I started looking at how parental care in frogs in general evolved. Just to remind you, earlier we talked about the ecological correlates of parental care, where parental care is evolved with smaller clutch sizes and larger eggs, and duration of care is linked with terrestriality. But then there is this concept of overcoming predation risk, which doesn't get covered in these two aspects. What I did during the lockdown was to look at 1,800 species of frogs across the world, and I categorized them based on their body colors and patterns. So I categorized green, brown as one group, red as one, yellow as one, and blue, black as one, colors. And then frogs have different kinds of patterns. So some of them have mottled patches, some of them don't have pattern, some of them have bars, and some of them have bands, and some of them have spots. So I broadly categorized them into different groups, and then wanted to see if some of these colors and some of these patterns are associated with the evolution of parental care. And I did this with species where we had information on parental care, which was close to 988 species. And I knew who was caring. Was it the male caring, or was it the female caring, or was it both of them caring? And I knew where they were caring. Were they caring for offsprings in the ground, or whether they were caring for offsprings in water? And then I also knew if the males and females were differently colored. So there were multiple levels of comparison I could do. And when I looked at this pattern, turns out the colors don't seem to matter. So dichromatism, when males and females are differently colored, turns out is widespread. So this image here is called a phylogenetic tree. Each of these gray lines represent two species that are closely related to each other. So if we start looking at relatedness of different species back in time, they all go back to a common ancestor, which is why you see something like this in the center. It's like a spoke and a wheel. Each of these bands, the orange and gray is no care and care, species where there's no care and species where there's care. And the blue ones are dichromatic species where the male and female are differently colored. The blue ones are non-dichromatic where the male and female look alike, and dichromatic where the male and female look different from each other. So initially we saw there was this pattern that was widespread. And when we did the analysis, there's a complicated set of codes that we run and to see if these two behaviors these two traits are associated. Turns out males that or parents that look alike care for the offspring. So species that are dichromatic don't really care for the offspring. This is contrary to what Darwin and Wallace said about males and females being differently colored should benefit parental care. Turns out it doesn't with frogs. What we also did then was to look at colors. So these colors and patterns, none of the colors were associated with parental care. So you could be any color and you could still care for offspring. And this becomes important because we expected green or brown, which is dull and cryptic, or blue and black, which is again dull and cryptic, to be associated with parental care. On the other hand, we also expected brightly colored frogs, things that are yellow or red. These are called conspicuous colors, and in nature, these colors are used as an aposematic color. Aposematism is when there's a bright color associated with some toxin or some secondary chemical defense. These two species are conspicuously colored, but they have a chemical defense. They are both poison frogs. So they can afford to not care for the predator, and they go like, oh, you can't eat me and I'll be whatever color and I'll do whatever I want. So we expected either of these to have associations with parental care. Turns out they don't. In terms of patterns, it's only the ones with horizontal stripes on them that was associated with parental care. And that too, if it was only the male that was carried and not the female. And this is interesting because these patterns, vertical lines or horizontal bands, cause what is called a motion dazzle effect, where a frog that's sitting which has bands, it suddenly jumps from one place to another. The predator will find it hard to locate where the frog went. So it kind of confuses the predator. And we think that's one reason why these bands are associated with parental care. It's associated only in males because if you realize it's the male that's vocalizing, and vocalization attracts predators which can also hear, not just vision, but they can also hear. Once that happens, the male is more vulnerable, and maybe because of the bands, they can jump and the predator won't be able to detect the frog. So there must be something that's going on, and we don't know enough about these things. This paper we recently published in a journal called Evolution, and we also made it to the cover of the journal. Incidentally, Shubha, who is here, also wrote about this in the Hindu for us. You can go back and look at it later. So that brings me to my end of my presentation. I might be a little early, but I need to thank a lot of people, especially my colleagues who have mentored me and people who have helped me collect data. A lot of these organizations either gave me money, supported my fieldwork, or hosted me in their organization to do this work. And I must thank the Tamil Nadu Science Foundation and Dr. Vijayan and Shubha for getting me on board and making me give this talk. And I'll be happy to take questions and comments. Thank you.
Wow.
And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, sir. So this 45 minutes has gone in one single minute. That's what I observe. It's very interesting, deep, and meticulous work you have done. So
thank you.
So what we gain in the last 45 minutes, it's your 20 years of work, I guess, right?
Not really. No, 10 years of work.
10 years of work we gained in 45 minutes. It's excellent. It's something excellent. So let us go with our question answer session. Let me step in, ask the first, my questions. I have a lot of questions. Let me start with the layman question. So I have, many of us have observed in the dry land, when rain comes, suddenly frogs appear.
Yes.
How come that happen? That's the first question I have.
Okay. This is definitely, I wouldn't call it a layman question, because in the Rig Veda, there are references to how the rain god is associated with the changing in frogs in the habitat. So they actually go on to describe that how one frog calls like a goat and the other bellows like a cow. So there are detailed descriptions of the patterns and colors on them. And definitely this is interesting because, culturally interesting, but also ecologically speaking, these frogs are dependent on moisture. They sense that they need water. And in summer, you'll still see frogs in summer. A lot of the work I'm doing in Bangalore now, you'll still see frogs in summer, but you won't see that many of them. And they'll be usually burrowed in the soil or hiding between the bark of a tree or in a tree hole. And as soon as there's moisture, I think they sense changes in humidity. We still don't know how they do it, but they can sense these changes and then they're actively starting to call. That's probably how they know it's monsoon also.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There is furthermore research on that. Now, how it senses the moisture, what genes that triggered the sensing. So what kind of mechanism for sensing? All these things are interesting questions.
Yeah. We know very little about frogs that way. So if any of you want to get into research, I would say study frogs, because there's like so many discoveries to be made.
A lot of things are there. So my second question is the direct developing. You call it as a direct developing. Could you please little bit more elaborate about the direct developing? I was not able to follow what you are telling.
Okay. So typically, if you pick up any school textbook on development of frogs, they will say the frogs will mate. Among frogs, the fertilization is external. So the female lays eggs, the male sheds the sperm on them, and the eggs will float in water. You'll see cell division happening, and slowly they'll hatch into froglets. So slowly they'll hatch into tadpoles. Arathavale they call it. So the tadpole has a tail, and slowly the tail gets reabsorbed and they form limbs. And slowly they evolve back into a frog and they hop onto land. This is typically what we are taught about amphibians. But over half of the 9,000 species of amphibians, they undergo direct development where the fertilization happens. There's external fertilization. The eggs are laid. The development happens inside the egg. So there's no tadpole at all. The embryo develops completely into a tiny frog inside the egg, and the eggs hatch and the baby frog comes out. This is what we call as direct development. And every time we have looked at direct development, it is in species that are breeding away from water. It makes sense, right? If you're a tadpole, you have to have water. But if you're in habitats that don't have enough water, then you just skip the stage where you depend on water. They undergo similar things like tadpoles. So the embryo still has a tail. The embryo still reabsorbs the tail and the limbs are formed. But it all happens inside a tiny little egg.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's super fascinating, and maybe humans have something to learn from it.
Another interesting question I come across when you show your picture, now the bamboo inside the bamboo, no, it is now the bamboo is standing vertical. The frogs goes up and lay egg at the top instead of laying in the bottom against gravity. How does it happen?
So the eggs have a mucous membrane sort of thing. So the eggs are stuck to the bamboo cavity. And these are tiny eggs, 5 millimeters in diameter. So I don't think gravity has so much of a...
Why it is preferring to be on the top rather than in the bottom?
So in the bamboo internode, so if you think of this as a bamboo internode, it's sealed on the bottom and the top. And bamboo, we all know, also produces water. It's called guttation. It's the plant's way of absorbing and exuding water. Because of guttation, bamboo sometimes accumulates water inside. But that water accumulates at the base. So if the frog eggs are at the base, then the eggs can drown. They can get water can fill up and they can drown. But if the eggs are on top, the hole is at the base. So it's like a drain hole where any water that accumulates is just draining out and the eggs are safe.
Yeah, it is an evolutionary thing, or it is very pre-planned. That's what I said.
I think so. I think these behaviors
it knows about the nature of bamboo. No, where should I lay the egg?
Yeah, I don't know if it's learned or if it's a evolutionary thing. We don't know enough. So that's something. So,
let me stop my questions. Let us jump to Dr. Engineer Murugesan. He wants to ask some questions. So,
yeah. Good morning. Myself, P. Murugesan Pandian.
Hello,
I am from Hosur, Tamil Nadu Science Forum, Krishnagiri Mavatam.
Okay.
The session is excellent.
Thank you, sir.
Just to know the frogs are laying eggs and bringing offspring. No, how they are escaping from the snakes?
Good question. So the frog that's breeding inside the bamboo. One of the reason I think they breed inside bamboo is they enter through the small cavity. So if you remember the video, the frog was like struggling to go inside. It's not very easy for a snake to go inside. The bamboo itself is about 20 millimeters in diameter. That's about 2 centimeters wide, 2.5 centimeters wide. So there are no snakes in that area that can go inside the bamboo. Which might be why they breed inside bamboo. But there are other frogs outside that lay eggs on leaves and under rocks. Many of them do get eaten by snakes.
Thank you. Excellent session. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
More things. many points I don't know. No. Did not came to know about frogs. So many species are there. You told no 450.
Yeah, 450 or 460 now.
Yeah.
And we are discovering new species every month.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent session. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
We like to have similar sessions.
Sure, we'll take care of it. No problem.
Okay.
We'll invite him again for another session, right?
Thank you.
Okay, let me invite Neha.
Good evening, sir. First of all, thank you so much for such a wonderful session. Now,
Thank you.
my question is, sir, as we just saw, like the male frogs will be sitting on the egg. Is it
Mhm.
just for protections, or are they undergoing any process like incubation, just like aves? Let me make it clear. Do male
Mhm.
frogs incubate eggs just like aves?
They might not be because frogs are ectotherms. Their body temperature is dependent on what is outside. So frogs cannot increase their body temperature like humans do. Humans hold a constant 37 degrees Celsius, whereas a frog sitting on an egg inside a bamboo will be the same temperature as the atmospheric temperature. So I don't think it's incubation, but it might be antifungal properties. So a lot of frogs have skin secretions called antimicrobial peptides. These are chemicals that have, they work like antibiotics basically. And a lot of frogs have evolved this because, sorry, frogs have evolved this because they are living in moist habitats all the time. And if you don't dry your towel for like 2 days, there'll be fungus on it. So the same thing happens on a frog also. And the natural mechanism they have is to secrete these antimicrobial peptides. The male sitting on the egg might be transferring the peptides onto the eggs and preventing any fungus. So I don't think it's incubation, simply because they're ectotherms, unlike birds, which can have a constant body temperature.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
So thank you.
And sir, good evening.
I invite Chandana. Chandana, please ask your question.
Good evening, sir. I'm Chandana. I'm doing my 8th grade in Coimbatore, sir. So
Ah,
your session
nice.
was so nice. So
Thank you.
your session was so nice, sir. I've never heard of such information about frogs, and there are many new information that I've got. The most shocking one was that the male frogs eat those toads or the eggs that were not their own kids. So that was so shocking for me. My question is, if the male frogs were the ones who carry the eggs, what will the female frogs do?
Fantastic question. This is an excellent question. I don't know what the female does, because we can't. So again, to give you a bit of context, the female is not in the bamboo. The female is out there doing foraging for food or whatever, and there are multiple males that are calling. The female comes and checks out each male and decides to go into the bamboo, one male, where she will lay the eggs. After she lays the eggs, presumably she goes out and gets more food, because producing an egg is costly. Egg is a lot of resources, right? The yolk is nutritious, and the female has to go eat a lot of food. And the female can't really afford to be sitting with the eggs all the time. Once the frog is outside of bamboo, I have no way to see where the frog is going. At least now we don't, but there are ways of tracking where the frogs are going. So for like a large snake like the king cobra, what we did is we put a radio transmitter, we surgically inserted it in the body, and with an antenna we can get signals. To do that on a tiny frog that's half the size of my thumb is incredibly difficult. But maybe in like 10 years from now, we'll have technology that will make small tags that we can put on these frogs. So the short answer is the female is out there eating food, and she's basically looking at different bamboo cavities where she'll decide to lay eggs.
Okay, sir. Then until how much long will the male take care of the eggs, sir?
Until when the eggs hatch. So that's about 40 days. So from when the eggs are laid to when the eggs hatch is about 40 days. And till that time, the male will be with the eggs.
Doesn't the mother take any other care after the eggs get hatched, sir?
Nope. The female leaves. And again, in a lot of groups of animals, it's the male who cares for the offspring and not the female. And there is still a lot of debate about why it's the male and why it's the female and why not both. Right? I mean, in humans, we associate parental care with mother. But in frogs and a lot of fish, it is only the male that cares for the offspring. And one reason they say is the difference in the between males and females, because the female has to produce eggs. So that's one reason they give. to say why the female can't be stuck in one place. The male can be stuck in one place because he doesn't produce much. He doesn't produce an egg, and the eggs are nutritious and they're costly. So the female has to eat a lot of food to be able to produce eggs that have rich yolk in them. So male parental care is very common in frogs. About 80% of all frogs, where there is parental care, it's always the male that cares for the offspring.
Okay, sir.
But again, why is an interesting question. Maybe you can figure it out when you become a scientist. We still don't know.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you for the answer, sir. And thank you for the session.
Okay. Shubha, you have some questions?
Yes, I have two questions actually. One is, you said 37 days the frog takes care of the eggs. You mean it doesn't go out at all, or it keeps going out and coming back in?
I suspect them to be going out. So one of the things I did was so wherever there is a hole in the bamboo, I put a camera outside and took pictures of it over. So I could only take one picture per minute. So there were a few times when the male came out and came back in, like a couple of minutes, the male was outside. So I don't know if the male came out to chase another male or to attract another female. So there are cases where they move out, and there are also cases where there are ants that go inside and don't come back. So the male frog might be eating them while protecting. They're also like, oh, there's food, I'm going to eat it. So they are getting some nutrition, but again, we don't know how much body weight they lose. So that will be something to do start of the breeding season, end of the breeding season, catch them and weigh them and see the weight difference. Maybe they're not eating anything. We don't know.
Okay, that's very fascinating. The other thing I wanted to ask was, in your particular branch of science, in ecology and evolution, it's important to be very, very sensitive to little things like when you see the frog entering the hole, to question whether what is going to happen to it. It takes a bit of sensitivity to be able to pose these questions. So, so how do you develop that? I mean, I don't know whether this is a good question, but
no, this is a fantastic question, and I don't think it's limited to all of ecology only. I mean, any field of science is based on observations. So there is a premise, there is an observation, which eventually leads to an idea. And I would think it's important in physics or in mathematics or somewhere else. But having said that, in ecology, it's particularly important because that's how I mean, it's important to pay attention. That would be my hunch in ecology. How you develop it is, I developed it by bird watching. I grew up as a kid in Bangalore, and I would go out bird watching with people, and bird watching as a hobby is incredibly rewarding because you're not only observing the bird, you're also looking at what it's doing, and you start observing it for a while. Whereas if you went with a camera, you take pictures and you move on. So bird watching is one hobby that at least benefited me in making sure, seeing where the observation ends or to see what happens because of something. And I don't think it's very hard to learn these skills also. Like, you spend enough time out in the wild, you're observing the same thing, you're seeing the same thing over and over again. You start seeing these patterns. And of course, we are standing on shoulders of our other giants, right? And ecology is no different. Other people have done these observations, and we have got mentors. We have got curious people like you who ask questions about, hey, why did this happen? That's when we also go, like, in the back of my mind, we're also thinking constantly, okay, the frog is entering bamboo. What is it doing inside? It's a very curious, logical next step progression kind of question. So I guess if I were to make it as an advice rather than an answer, I would say look for things and pay attention. Keep all your senses open, like eyes, ears, smell. Be aware of situational awareness is an important thing in ecology, as well. I think equally important in other things. Maybe you'll have better insight than me on other aspects of science. I think it's important.
Thank you so much for this wonderful session.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a couple of questions in the chat box.
Yes, I can look at them also.
Yeah. Something related to our organization. Let me answer.
Okay.
Now, someone is asking about the certificate.
Okay.
So Suguna might be a student. So what we used to do is now, if the students get registered to get into the meeting, now they must have registered their email. So they can get the certificate through email. It's an automatic generation. If you register the attendance, you will get the certificate. Otherwise, don't get it.
There's a question here by Aditya on reverse parental care, where the offspring takes care of the parent, which is expected in our society. Is there a biological basis or an evolutionary advantage for such expectation? So this, I'll have to give a longer answer and I'll have to guess a lot of things because I don't know the literature so well. There is something called kin selection, where individuals who are related to each other benefit by helping each other. And this makes sure that there is a overall higher genetic fitness. So if I have to take care of my nephew, then there is more advantage for me because 1/4 of my nephew's genes are the same as me, because my sister and I would have inherited genes from my mother, and she would have passed on my sister would have passed on half of her maternal DNA to her child. So this is kin selection, and biologically there is basis for kin selection, and people have used this to explain why cooperation evolved in a society. Like in humans, why should we cooperate? Why should there be a science forum, right? So here the fitness is getting people excited about science. Instead of genetics, you could think about it as a different kind of fitness where there's a larger benefit to the overall group of people or the society. And there's a widespread debate also about what kin selection on one hand and group selection on the other. The group selection proponents of the group selection hypothesis say whatever benefits the entire group is what the individual does. Whereas kin selection talks about I'm going to help my relative and not anyone else in the group. So as far as offspring taking care of the adult, I think it's only humans who do it. None of the other organisms are hardwired to do such things, or they don't even do such things because there's always a conflict for survival in nature. So 2 frogs, adult and parent, living together means that there is less resource for each of them. So there's very fierce competition, and usually they don't really form groups. But there are social behaviors also seen in frogs, where again it's only the adult that's caring for the offspring and not the other way around. I'd be surprised to see things going the other way around. Humans are an exception. I wouldn't base any broad biological conclusions on what humans do. So that's my answer to the question. What else?
That's about it. I think we don't have any questions. And
okay,
any of the audience have any questions? You can directly raise your hand and ask the speaker.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
Hi, sir. How are you, sir? Fine.
Good.
Okay, sir. Actually, we are having that cannibalism behavior, right, sir? So is that a behavior which will raise to that particular organism when the eggs got damaged or when they gone into some environmental pressures? Then only they will exhibit that behavior, or whenever they want to have the urge to eat eggs, they'll just have it?
Good question, and my answer would be I don't know. But in this case, at least in this species, the eggs were not really damaged because I was taking pictures every night. I could see the embryo developing and I could see the eggs going in the natural progression of things. I suspect that it's the male who, more than the urge to eat eggs, it might be the urge to take over the bamboo cavity. Because if you think about it, the bamboo cavity, which has to have the perfect dimensions and perfect cavity hole, is a rare thing in the wild. So the squirrel has to have made holes there. The male has to have found it, and the female has to go inside and lay eggs. It might be that the males are paying attention to who is calling from around them. And as soon as they hear someone stopping to call, like when I remove the male is no longer vocalizing, the male is silent. So they might go in there to check out what's going on, and they might be just taking over the territory, saying, okay, there are eggs here, I'm going to eat it. That might be what's going on, but we need to do another careful set of experiments to see if it's the presence of the male or just the presence of eggs. So one way to do it would be to damage the eggs and put them there and see if the male eats them. Male still eats them. We don't know. But there are examples from the South American poison dart frogs, which suggest that these male frogs have a very good spatial memory. So what they did one cool experiment, and I'll maybe take a minute to explain this. First, they mapped out the territory of a male frog, and they counted all the places where the male was attending to eggs. So in this species, the male is on the ground and he goes and attends to multiple egg clutches where he goes and urinates on them. They knew the territory of the male and they knew where the eggs were. And they took the eggs from male 1 and introduced the eggs in the territory of male 2. And the male 2 protected these eggs, even though the eggs were not his, because the eggs were introduced inside the territory of male 2, which tells us that the males care for the eggs within their territory, irrespective of whose eggs they are. But then they had to find out evidence for this. So what they did then was they took the male 2 and they took the male 2's eggs and put them in the territory of male 1. And the male 2, which was guarding its eggs earlier, started eating the eggs, even if it's own egg, which is how they showed that they care more about the territory and not recognize whose eggs they were. So in their own territory, they would care for anybody's eggs. But in a new territory, they would eat all the eggs, including their own eggs. So we don't know if such things are happening with our frog. It's incredibly difficult to do these experiments because they're inside the bamboo and like you can't change anything inside. So maybe we'll find a group of frogs that breed outside of bamboo and we can maybe do these things. Hopefully.
Yeah, got it, sir. Really logical answer. Yeah. And one more thing, sir, if we come to the skin selection, so it will just develop based on their progressive developmental process, or it will come from the genetic nature. For example, if I take a human, if they have some twin babies, so I'll just separate the twin baby in the age of within 12 months. Then I'll just put them at the same place after 20 years. So will they show that kin selection or?
Well, it's hard to say, right? And again, humans are a terrible example to talk about anything broadly biological because human systems are wired completely differently. I mean, we are ingrained to be like, oh, this is your brother, this is your sister. In the wild, that doesn't happen. In all the other vertebrates, okay, maybe primates, it does happen. But there might be truth in recognizing each other because there is a lot of chemical signaling that goes on. For example, there's something called major histocomponent proteins, which by olfactory cues, by smelling these chemicals, we are able to associate with certain people. So again, this is an experiment. I don't know completely what the experiment is. They looked at mate choice in humans and they made a random bunch of people, random bunch of men. They gave them a new t-shirt, all of them the same brand, same thing, same size. They made them exercise and they gave the soiled t-shirts to a group of women and asked them to smell it and see which male they would like, which male they like or which male they prefer. Turns out that's how they figured out that the chemical signal was an important factor in attraction in humans. So between twins, for example, or between siblings, there might be some major histocomponent protein chemical association that we still don't know about. And maybe that's what triggers the kin selection behavior, or it could be something else also. We really don't know about these things enough to make like broad overarching statements.
Okay.
There's a lot to be done. Yeah, go on.
Okay. And about hibernation, so it's a process of inactivating the entire physiological process, or what, sir?
A lot of frogs do hibernate. Hibernation is when an animal, for the benefit of others who might not know what hibernation is, they reduce their metabolism, they slow down, and they go through a dry phase or a snowy phase, and they emerge out, and then they continue living life as they are. Humans can't really do that because we burn a lot of calories all the time. Our metabolism doesn't really slow down unless you're like an athlete with a low resting heart rate. With frogs, what can happen, at least the ones in the temperate areas where there's a lot of snow, the metabolism almost completely shuts down. Their heart beats once in a while and the frog is like in a suspended animation phase. In India, we don't know if frogs hibernate. There are anecdotal reports of some of the burrowing frogs. So there are frogs that burrow into the soil. They are known to make a protective layer of mucus-like membrane around the body, which protects the moisture, and they form like a loose sac kind of thing, and they burrow into the ground and stay there for like a few months. And as soon as the first rain hits the ground, somehow they sense it and they emerge out and they continue living as they would live. We don't know what the actual mechanisms are, at least with frogs in India. With the Western frogs, there are frogs which have antifreeze and all that, so that the blood doesn't freeze at all and so on.
Okay, sir.
They've evolved to different strategies in different parts of the world. Yeah.
Okay, sir. And what about the rate of survivability, sir, during their embryonic interval period?
Great question. We have no idea. A lot of these are fascinating questions, right? I mean, survival, at least in the Chalazodes frog, I know one egg died in the control where it did nothing. One egg dying is like almost 100% survivorship from the embryo stage. Once they become froglets, we don't know how many of them survive. And it's very hard to also see these frogs there. The size of my little thumbnail, 2-3 millimeters long. How are we going to track them in the forest and all that? I have no idea. Maybe somebody smarter than me can figure it out, but at least in the recent or in the near future, unless we come up with some technological revolution where we can track these tiny things, or we do a controlled experiment where we put up like a cage in the forest where we change things and manipulate the setup, it's very hard to say what proportion of them survive. But these are important questions because there are upstream implications of it on the food web. Like frogs are important links in the food web, and they need to survive to be able to be prey for snakes or prey for insects or prey for bats. Like bats are an important predator of frogs, and they pick up a lot of these frogs regularly. So there are consequences of survivorship on the ecosystem, but again, we are limited by how much we can do. With a mammal, it's easy to look at survivorship. You can mark a langur or you can mark a bonnet macaque and track them. Yeah.
Okay, sir. But anyhow, thanks for your patient answers.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So again, Shubha, you have.
Yeah, one question prompted by what you said just now, also, is a squirrel a herbivore or a carnivore?
Oh, the squirrels are generally omnivores. They eat insects also. They eat a lot of fruits, insects, fiber. So the squirrels we know in KMTR, they are the ones. These squirrels actually have a behavior where they hang out with birds. Birds form what is called a mixed hunting party, where different groups of birds, different size classes, they come together and forage as a flock. So this temporary flock is something that the squirrel also joins. And when these birds are moving around, they're flushing insects and all. And the squirrel, we have seen squirrels catch and eat insects also. Like they crunch on cicadas and all that. But they also nibble on the bark of the tree. And the bamboo, when they chew through the bamboo, the inside is very fibrous and very juicy. So maybe that's why they get water from. But in general, short answer, they're omnivores. They would eat a lot of things. Because
always these books for children and all show them eating nuts and things like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. In the forest, we wouldn't get any tree nuts. Like at least in India, like it's probably a temperate thing where you get like pine nuts and you have all the acorns and all that. It's I think a Western domination of cartoons. we don't have enough here from our own parts that inform our thing, and that's probably because we don't have enough scientists talking to people. You guys are doing. I was looking at the list of talks that you guys have organized, and it's super impressive. I want to go back and listen to them, at least a few of them.
So all of them are available in a YouTube.
No, definitely. Yeah. We need such things to happen, and again, people like Shubha who report the science that we do. We write papers in journals which nobody reads. and more people read the newspaper article than the actual paper itself.
So that's the objective of Tamil Nadu Science Forum.
I know. That's why I jumped at the opportunity when Shubha asked. So that's probably how I see things changing, but they should change more. We still got a long way to go.
Yeah. Now I see the squirrel hole is a little bit small. How can the squirrel enter into that hole?
The squirrel doesn't enter the bamboo at all. The squirrel is just making holes and going about his business. The squirrel is
it's
just
making hole to navigate.
No. Oh, maybe it's a good point. I haven't thought about it. Maybe the squirrel using it as a landmark, saying this is I've nibbled here. I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't know.
But that hole is making use of the frog to get into that, right?
Yeah, the frog is a secondary hole nester. It doesn't care.
Got it.
So I also did some experiments where I made the hole, and the frogs take it. They don't care who makes the hole, as long as it's in the correct dimension, like the diameter of the bamboo is large enough, and the holes are at the base. The frogs will enter and start breeding. They don't care who makes the hole. So the squirrel making it might be for navigation, like you said. I don't know. I'm going to have to look this up. Think about it and maybe do an experiment. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Cool. Nice. Good. Anyone else have any questions?
Anyone else have any questions? I think we are going as per our schedule. So everything perfectly matches with our schedule. We still have half an hour time, and I assign up to 6 o'clock.
Okay.
30 minutes is assigned for question answer session. Of course, I gave allowance for another 30 minutes to have more questions. If there is no questions, we can wind up.
Okay. Cool.
Sundar, what's your thought? We can go ahead and wind up, or we can wait for some more
questions. We are not seeing any question, we can wind up.
Okay. Thank you.
Some more questions.
Yeah.
Very good evening, sir.
Hi. Good evening.
Sir, I want to know that years back there was a news that frogs are coming with the rains. This falling like that. Rains are frogs are falling like rains. What's your opinion?
I guess they meant it metaphorically. It's raining frogs is a metaphor that we use, and they wouldn't fall from anywhere. I mean, there could be cases where there are reports where fish have fallen from storms, thunderstorms and all that. And these are typically from North America, where you have tornadoes that might have picked up some fish along with water as it's whooshing past. With countries like India, we don't have tornadoes, or we don't have such intense tornadoes. It's very unlikely that frog falls from the sky as rain. It doesn't, at least I don't know. I don't see the plausibility of that happening.
Yes, this is what actually I want to know, that actually what is your opinion? Because as you are working with it, so you might have developed something regarding this. The tornado is the I think so this is the right answer, because
I mean, logically, how else would a frog get into the clouds or in the sky? Right? That being said, there are frogs that can glide. So there are gliding frogs in our Western Ghats. We call them tree frogs, and they glide from one tree top to another. And the flight is usually horizontal, I mean diagonal, because they go from a high thing and they basically parachute down to another tree. But it's still not rain. You won't see that many.
But it's not going up, right?
Okay. They climb up. They have to climb up,
but going down is parachute, not.
So they have webbing between their feet, and they basically, like a parachute, they come down. We have 4 species of tree frogs in India, I think, or maybe 5. We have it in the northeast part of India and in the Western Ghats.
Red-eyed frog. Red-eyed
frogs are South American. We have what is called the Malabar gliding frog, which is green in color and it has red colored webbings. And we have the Calakkad gliding frog, which is found in the Calakkad Munduthurai Tiger Reserve. We also have the pseudo-Malabar gliding frog, which is found in the Annamalais. And we have the crafty tree frog, or the short-handed tree frog, which is Rhacophorus lateralis, which is found in parts of Karnataka. There are some in Northeast India. I don't know the names. I don't know the names of these species, but these are all frogs in the same family of tree frogs. All of them will have webbing in their feet, webbing in their hand and in their feet. Typically, frogs have webbing in only their hind feet. The arboreal gliding frogs have them also in the hand. So that's an adaptation they have.
Because I'm a science teacher, and in our science book, there is a picture of red-eyed frog, which fly, and they found in our subtropical or some I don't exactly remember in which rainforest. Yes, it is in rainforest. It was mentioned in that book. That's why.
Rainforests of Costa Rica and Panama, not in India. They're mostly in what's that place in South America, Central American, for Gamboa and all that. So that's why they don't go as far as Amazon. They're more in the Central American parts. So like where the Panama Canal is. So all those countries have the red-eyed tree frog. Agalicnis calidreus is the species, and the beautiful frogs. I've only seen pictures of them. They also incidentally have a lot of parental care behavior. And because we are talking about red-eyed tree frogs, there's something called hatching plasticity that they have observed in these frogs, where the eggs are laid on leaves and the eggs hatch as tadpoles and they fall into water. But then there is also a snake that is around, which goes on the leaves and eats the eggs.
Okay.
And this researcher, Professor Karen, who studied it in 1985, found that whenever there's a snake that's moving on the leaf, the eggs all hatch early. So usually for embryos to hatch, they have to reach a certain stage of development. And these eggs were able to sense the presence of a snake, and they would hatch earlier than they would hatch otherwise. So normally if they hatch at 20 days, and if the snake was on the branch, they would hatch at 10 days. So they were able to evaluate the risk of continuing as a embryo on an egg and get eaten, or hatch early, fall into the water, and then figure it out.
Okay.
These tiny little embryos are also capable of taking these complex decisions. I mean, we take decisions like this. Do I buy this computer or not? Do I jump into this water or not? We make these conscious decisions about things. And a tiny little embryo that is like not microscopic, but tiny. They are also able to make such complex decisions. And this group in South America has been studying these frogs for 25 years now, and they think that it's the vibrations that the frogs are able to sense. So if a snake moves on the branch, there's a set of vibrations. And again, how do they sense these vibrations? How do they know these vibrations are important? It's probably genetically ingrained in them. We don't know how they learn things. So yeah, that's the story on the red-eyed tree frog.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
We don't get them in India. Our textbooks are often always wrong. we still unfortunately teach children that frogs are amphibians are animals that live on land and water. It is not. That's not the definition of amphibios. It goes to the Greek term amphi, which is dual, and bios meaning life forms. Dual life forms, they refer to it as the tadpole, which is completely different looking than the adult.
Yes, yes.
That's the origin of the word amphibios. And Linnaeus, Carolus Linnaeus, who we know from the taxonomy discovery of taxonomic system, he was the one who coined the term amphibios. And if you look at his Systema Naturae, the book in which he described amphibians, he describes them as loathsome, disgusting creatures and poisonous and all that. So he does a terrible job of describing amphibians, and I think that attitude also has to change now. A lot of them. Yesterday, I was out in Bangalore looking at frogs, and I walked into someone, and he's like, "Oh, frogs, disgusting thing. Why do you want to study them?" That's also the unfortunate mindset which needs to change.
No, I also observed that we have also some kind of religious belief that these squirrels has helped Rama to build the bridge. It could be herbivorous. That could be the.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, a lot of these cultural things we don't know how they came about. Evolution to an extent is easy to explain. Cultural evolution is incredibly difficult.
Correct. Yeah.
A lot of changing things there.
Yeah. Okay. So before winding up, now I have I want to repeat a couple of announcements. One is, I appeal all the participants to become the member of PSL Telegram group. We have posted the link for that in the chat box. You just click the link and become the member of PSL Telegram group. We have posted the link for the feedback form as well. Please fill up your feedback form. Don't forget to fill up your contact details, including your email ID. So we'll be including you in your mailing list. Another one is you can directly come into our mailing group, Google group, PSL Google group. That's also been provided. Just send a mail that PSL popular-science-lectures plus subscribe at googlegroups.com. So you send an empty mail, you'll automatically become a member. So we also posted all the lectures in YouTube. It's available. If you miss the class, you tell your friends that plenty of lectures are there. Almost out of 51, 49 lectures are there in YouTube. And anyway, even if you miss it, now you can see the lectures. Go through this lecture if possible and spread the news to your friends. And also appeal to become a member of Tamil Nadu Science Forum. It's only 30 rupees annual fee. Just click it and send your subscription through Google Pay. Finish. You will get our monthly newsletter. So that's the indication that you are the member. So with that, let me.
Vijayan, only one correction I would like to make. The filling up the feedback form, it triggers the e-certificate. So make sure you are filling the feedback as well as getting your.
Yeah, students who want to get the e-certificate, they have to fill up the feedback form. Another assignment for them. That's fine. Okay. So first of all, let me thank Dr. Sheshadri for his wonderful lecture. So it's really popular. It's really popular. It doesn't go into the genetic aspect or do the calculations or the base pair, all those things we escaped, but we understand what is in nature. So it's really popular. I thank you very much, sir. It's a wonderful lecture.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So my thanks goes to Subhash. No, she took pain to invite you and get you to the meeting, and of course she is a part of the PSL team and she's a member. Anyway, I need to thank her for special thank for her to identify you and bring her for the PSL. And I'll thank my colleague Sundar for arranging these, taking care of this technical need of this lecture. He's working behind it, and behind all the PSL lectures. My special thanks to go to Sundar, and I thank all my EC members who is part of these organizing the events. I am apart from that. Let me thank all the participants who patiently stay with us and make the event very much vibrant and live. They also ask a lot of questions to make it a wonderful event. I thank all the participants for this event. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. See ya. Bye bye.
Bye.